Hi, welcome to Weatherford Daze. Once again, this is Jason and this is Rachel. We're glad that you're here with us. We have been moving merrily along through these explorations of the science fiction world of H.G. Wells. And we are very eager to be with you tonight. I'm trying out some alternative words for excited and enthused and fired up,
exhilarated,
stoked. Those are all in there.
We just need to use all E words.
But stoked sounds like I'm a surfer from Ojai, California. It's like, what up? Yeah, stoked. Anyway, so we are going to be talking about a very influential book tonight, and that is The Time Machine. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a very generic title, but that's only because that's what we call time machines, is because of this title, Time Machines. They're like, I wish I had a time machine. Not a chronological conveyance or something. No, just time machine.
Was he the first, do you know?
To call it a time machine?
No, to have written a fictional work about a time machine. Were there...
Okay.
I mean, I would imagine there were time travel devices of some sort.
Well, plot devices, story devices. Because Rip Van Winkle, he fell asleep and would be aged. He didn't necessarily...
Right.
But there are stories of...
You had a lot of Sleeping Beauty and that kind of stuff that would have been...
I'm talking about you need years.
To actually be able to move through time.
Oh, no. Usually, well, if it was like a doorway or a portal sometimes is what they would... But it was usually a magical conveyance.
Space, right. It's just teleportation. It wouldn't be an actual...
a vehicle or a piece of furniture, which this kind of, it always looked like a piece of furniture to me.
I mean, it had to have been one of the very earliest.
Yes, I think so.
Types.
I can't for the life of me remember any other books or stories about a machine that let you travel in time, but I bet you they are out there. But that just shows how influential this book is because, we wouldn't have any of the other famous ones that we know of from science fiction if not for this one. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have more, I'd say, magical abilities than this one.
Kind of funny.
This one just goes back and forth in time, not in space.
If you were to look at the different types of magical things and items that you could have, right?
Right.
I would look at most other types of things would be good. And this one I would say could be good, but there's a lot of negatives to it.
Negatives to the machine? Or
to the machine and to the ability. To the ability to just move through time, right? Most of the time when you look at the ability to transport through time, it's seen as a negative. It's seen as almost like a very sad thing because a lot of people don't like to think about, especially if you're moving along your own timeline.
Yeah.
What that looks like. I mean, there are people that would use it to try to, go back and to warn themselves and that kind of thing. But a lot of times people, when you examine that thought, they go, it doesn't work. Because when you change one thing in the past, it changes, everything about who you are and the lessons that you learned and that kind of thing. And then a lot of times people, when they go forward, they just kind of imagine the world as bleak in the future. And I guess I'm just contrasting that with, of any of the superpowers. Mm-hmm. We looked at The Invisible Man last week.
Right.
Invisibility is probably one of the worst superpowers that you could have, right? It's got kind of the most negative connotations to it. There's a lot of super abilities that you could have that are a lot better. The power of flight, Okay, well, real quick, to dip back into The Invisible Man, the thing about it is, during that time, they didn't have special cameras and sensors that could see body heat, but in more modern Invisible Man stories, they're like, oh, well, we'll just put on these goggles and they can see
everything like
Right.
movies like Memoirs of Invisible Man, Predator 2. They all had anything that could be cloaked and made invisible. There's always some technological way you could see it, and that just makes it interesting story-wise. But it's a downside.
I find it interesting that the types of tales that H.G. Wells told were not like, oh, here's this cool thing, let's explore all the cool things that you could do with it. His tales were all, this is something that somebody might think is cool at first, but let me tell you how horrible it actually is.
Right.
It just...
Well, it reminds me of The Fly, both the new one and the old one. With teleportation, you're thinking, oh, great, we'll get from point A to point B, but what happens if the atomic structure gets messed up in the middle of that? And that's where a lot of science fiction is not just, hey, isn't this neat? Let's do some cool things with it. That's what comic books did. Many times science fiction is a warning. And it's going to be, we're going to, of course, lead into that as we talk about Time Machine, but it's a warning. Terminator is a warning about AI and cybernetic organisms and also time travel.
I never really thought of that as being such a distinguisher between science fiction and fantasy, though.
Yeah.
Because fantasy very much is a lot more just beautiful and fun and light on the whole. And, you're looking at all of the cool things that you can do. It's not so philosophical in a very heavy way, whereas sci-fi just does tend to be more heavy.
It does tend to be. There are sci-fi comedies and things where they take things for granted, like we've got space travel now, like Hitchhiker's Guide. We have space travel now. Let's say something funny about humanity or reality through that.
Wait, are you saying Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is sci-fi?
It's science fiction comedy, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's science fiction. It takes for granted that those things exist, but it often uses those things as part of the fun of it. Like the improbability drive of the ship called Heart of Gold. It basically, it's highly improbable that you would do certain things, but it just does them.
So much more comedic,
ridiculous,
and so much more of a parody that I don't know that I would even classify it as sci-fi. Like, it's a parody of sci-fi.
As much as Discworld is a parody of fantasy, they're in the same realm, and those two guys knew each other. At least I've heard stories that they ran in the same circles.
Didn't they write a book or two together?
No, that was Neil Gaiman, I think. Wrote,
that's right.
They did Good Omens, which we talked about on this podcast, by the way.
We need to do more of those. We really do. That'd be fun. But
I'd love to do some Discworld at some point in the future.
That's an aside. Okay.
It's on my list. But the downside of the actual machine that's in the Time Machine, I think, is that it's almost like, and this is true both in the movie adaptations and the other, is that when there's a lever on it, and you push the lever forward, depending on how far you push it, it's like a faucet. You can turn it full blast, or you can do it like slightly. And I'm like, that a lot of that is not pressing, in the DeLorean from Back to the Future. You type in the year you want to go to, and you drive really fast, and it happens. But with this, it's all in your control of the stick.
Faster, slow.
Yeah, and it feels like you're fast forwarding a VHS tape, is what I was talking about.
Which, with that, should we do a brief synopsis of what the plot is about?
Yeah, let's talk about the plot of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Absolutely.
So, essentially, the story is about a man who asks a bunch of people, smart people, because we know H.G. Wells liked to distinguish classes of people by how smart they were. You were either in the intelligent or you were in the rest of the peasants, according to him. We talked about that a little bit last week. That was one of the things that irritated me about.
There's a term in a book, or I think it's a TV show that I read, a TV show that I watched. It was called Gods versus Clods, and basically there's like people that are just up here, and then there's just the nose picker people at the very bottom of the rung.
You can tell a lot about, a writer's thoughts, whether they're, putting all the pretty people in a category, or they're putting all the smart people in a category, or, the wealthy people in a category. There tends to be a lot of that distinction, but it really is, H.G. Wells he definitely put the intelligent people in a category by themselves versus everyone else, and
rubs you the wrong way.
I
think it rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah, it does. But anyway, so he invites over this group of intelligent people, and our main character, who again is an unnamed.
I was just going to mention that he is unnamed. They actually in the movie they call him George, and I thought it was a playoff of, Herbert George Wells.
Probably.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Sorry.
He invites them over, and he tells them, I have invented this time machine, right? And here's how it works, and, basically says, imagine what it would do, and he has kind of like a tiny version of it at first, and then like says that, model. He's been working on a larger one. He's almost to the point of having it work, and he's going to test it out. Then he invites them to come back a week later, and they start the dinner without him, and he walks in, part way, or like as they're already into eating, and he's just
disheveled.
Yes.
That would be a good word.
He's very worse for wear in his appearance. He's starving, and he sits down. He's like, okay, I've got to tell you the adventure that I've just been on. And apparently he's been traveling for, I think it's 8 days that he says that he's been traveling. And which, in the scheme of things, that seems really like a short amount of time for the amount that he did. I thought that was an odd thing.
Well, I mean, when there's no real way to tell the time except for the sun going up and going down, there's quite a bit you can get done in 8 days. Quite a bit of adventure.
Yeah, but even just the time that he
spent 80 days.
In the first place, that seems like it wasn't quite a lot of time for the amount of stuff that he ended up doing. But anyway,
it's time travel.
Yeah, it's time travel. So that's what happens. He tells this really quite difficult to believe story of traveling 800,000 years into the future, and what the world was like, and what humanity had evolved into.
Or devolved in some ways.
Yes. And then how, he got back. So it's this story, and it kind of finishes up, which we'll talk a little bit, we'll talk a lot more about what he met there. But he finishes up where he comes back, and he's only there for a very brief amount of time before he takes off again. And he's, it ends the book with saying he's been gone for 3 years. We don't know what's happened to him, but the assumption is he's just not coming back. So either he found some place he decided to stay, or he died sometime in the future or in the past. Who knows? But it's a very short book. It is written in a way that just kind of does suck you in. You get engaged in the story. So it's a well-written book. It has been very influential. But again, it was one that, this one I didn't think so much, it had to be added to. It wasn't complete.
Yeah.
As much as, like I did with The Invisible Man and with The War of the Worlds. This one I felt like it told a complete story. I just found myself once again disagreeing with the philosophy of the writer and how he felt, the the world would evolve and all of the implications of that. So that's where I would
Wells'
love to get
philosophy is all. And I mean, like, in every one of his stories,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we talked about this, I think, during War of the Worlds episode, but so often the complaint with TV shows and movies nowadays is they say, well, they started with the message. And I put the message in capital letters, you know, what we want to say about either the current state of things or gender or class or, you know, or racism or any of these things. That's the message. And all the other stuff is just the clothes that it wears. We're in a science fiction world, but guess what? We're really talking about this. So much so that it doesn't even make sense in the story. So a problem a lot of viewers had was that even when you portrayed a far future society, it still had the same problems we're having right now, even though they showed we got over that, we moved past it, but we didn't, because they can only see their issues that were going on right now. And I think that's not that
every sci-fi movie that I've seen or book does the exact same thing. I mean, the assumption is that as long as there's humanity, there's going to be the same issues that humanity has always faced. I mean, even when you look at Star Trek and you look at different alien societies, these alien societies all have the same problems that humans do. It's just, we can't imagine anything truly too far beyond what we actually deal with. We just can't.
And that's also, you know, there's confusion in that, like with Ender's Game, with the alien species in that, but they couldn't even comprehend this society. But
they still, you know, in the further episodes or the further books of Ender's Game,
yeah,
you still had these humans that ended up having these characteristics that humans could relate to. Once we got past the places where we were different, we found places where we were the same. And
the same with The Expanse. I mean, you know, we still have political machinations and arguments, and
there's only so far
yeah,
that human imagination can take us. We can take and expand on what we know as human societies, but going completely, I mean, it's you kind of go back to there's nothing new under the sun.
There's some science fiction that does that, but I think that the science fiction in H.G. Wells, he definitely, and he doesn't mask it at all. I mean, he sits there and has his time traveler stop for a whole, you know, 3 or 4 pages and kind of go over what he thinks is the split, you know, and we can talk about that.
How humanity got to where it did.
So where does humanity go?
Yeah, basically it ends up splitting into 2 very distinct and different races. So you have the
Eloi,
and you have the Morlocks.
Right.
Which I will say, when I was a kid, my parents watched a version of The Time Machine, and I had nightmares from it.
It's the 1961 from George Powell. It's got to be.
Probably was. It was.
That's a favorite. That's a favorite of mine. I'm sorry.
But I really, from a young age, was traumatized by this. So I'm going into this, you know, I've always gone, I don't like this. I don't like this story. So I'm, you know, just full disclosure. Some of the imagery did freak me out, but I watched it later as a science fiction enjoyer and as a young man. And I honestly, I probably
appreciated
definitely the best way to do it.
I appreciated it a lot more. I think years later, but I don't know if I can get you to watch it with me or
so
not.
You've got the Eloi are this very childlike. They're actually, I guess both of the species are shorter than they are now.
And the Eloi are very willowy, and they're not muscular people at all.
Right.
It's my people.
They're described as very beautiful people. Very kind of, they're childlike and very angelic being. They're these chirping little voices, and
It looks like a Paris fashion show, I guess,
Yeah.
but with all these,
Just-
togas.
they seem very carefree and innocent.
To a fault, I think, the
Mhm.
carefree thing, because there's a scene where a character, one of the Eloi, falls into the water, and then they're just like, whatever, and the main character saves the Eloi.
So they've lost their fear, they've lost their compassion, they've lost a lot of what, we would consider makes humans humans.
Wisdom from past literature and things like that. They show that in.
They don't have there's no ingenuity, there's no drive to actually better themselves or their situation. And that does come into play later, because we find out that the Morlocks are a underground species of human that are light sensitive. So the Eloi are vegetarians, the Morlocks are carnivorous. However, we find out that their food source is actually the Eloi. So they,
Like cattle, yeah.
right. They seem to be more intelligent, but their intelligence preys off of the innocence of the Eloi. And the only thing that really
And they do know fear.
keeps the Eloi safe is the sun. The fact
Yeah,
that the
I was
Morlocks
mentioning
are.
about the matches and fire. They don't like fire.
But with that, you have a race that has, or this split where it's like, you've got all of the kind of what makes men predators and ingenuity and all of this stuff. The Morlocks are the only ones that have that. But even then, they don't seem like they're super intelligent even then. Like, there's just been this...
They understand the machines, though. They're obviously keeping these things going. And to me, Wells is kind of talking about, there's the people that make those things really work, but they are invisible to most of the people at the upper echelons. He even says the haves and the have-nots. He's really hammering it home.
Saying this is the worker class, and this was the wealthy class, and the worker class were forced underground, and but eventually it became where the worker class turned on their masters and started preying on them. So, but when you look at it, it really doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why that would happen. Like, he seems to just kind of go, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. But to me, the thing that would have happened, knowing humanity, would not have been that they stay underground until they lose their tolerance to light because they're forced to be underground. I would think that they would constantly be trying to sneak back up, and that their revolt would not be just being content to be underground and to have, their people on the surface be their cattle, which is the way that he described them. That they were being, kept in clothing and, everything just like you would keep a herd of cows. But I would think that they would want to take back the land. That would be where
their food
they
source
would go.
Be gone, though. If you get, that's why a lot of times in movies with vampires in here, why don't the vampires just eat everyone? Take everyone. It's because your food source is gone. So.
But why?
Same reason why we don't eat every animal on planet Earth, because we can't.
See, though, the logic disappears, though, because he assumes at first that the Eloi are the way that they are before he learns about the Morlocks. He assumes that they are the way that they are because they have eliminated every struggle and every downfall, right? So there's no longer sickness, there's no longer decay, they don't have to work for anything. And because of that, they have become completely complacent. But then we find out that that's not true.
Right.
So if that's not true, and they still have an enemy that preys on them, how come they're complacent? How come there's nothing in them that wants to fight back against the predators that are preying on them? They've become prey animals, yet they're complacent in that?
They don't
That
know.
doesn't make
I don't
any
think they know
sense.
that they can fight back. It's just kind of like their society is so...
Well, it's the same problem as you have with evolution, the concept of evolution as a whole. You know, when you look at all of these tiny things that had to happen over such a long period of time,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense that they could have happened one by one, because at some point things would have broken down. There are some things that had to have happened completely together in order for an animal to have, worked. Like, an eyeball has to be complete for you to have sight. A giraffe has to be able to bend its head down.
It's called irreducible complexity.
Right.
Each of those parts are so complex that they can't develop on an individual basis.
But the idea that that they had to have had no predators for such a period of time that they completely lost their survival instincts, which is one of the things that kind of defines humanity, right?
Yeah.
Is our survival instincts. The fact that when something preys on us, we fight back. And then to say that we lost the survival instinct and then another predator appeared after that survival instinct had completely gone, and it didn't spark the survival instinct to come back naturally, does not. It's like, how did this actually happen over such a long period of time that the two could actually coexist? They can't.
There's an explanation that is missing there, and like I said, like we talked about before, with Invisible Man and War of the Worlds, the movies invented some things to fill in the gaps. I don't like this one as much as the old one, but there's a newer time machine movie, and that one...
How did I know you were going to go there?
Yes. That one has a scene where he's going into the future, near future, and there is a moon disaster. Basically, there's some kind of asteroid or something that hits the moon, and it causes some with a moon base or something, it causes some issue, and it drove people underground. They had to go underground, and so some of them didn't go underground, some of them did. And the ones that went underground, they stayed underground and developed a certain way. And then whenever the crisis abated, they still were in that same... So they were trying to explain what was not given in the novel. And maybe it's not as good for that, but...
The thing is that he had them the way that they were, not because it actually literally made sense, but because that was the aspect that he wanted to examine.
Yeah, philosophy is all.
Because this was his socialist ideals of, and what he wanted to warn against. So he made a society where it had gone to such an extreme that he could actually prove his point. But it turns out that his point is actually flawed. And it doesn't. He's actually shooting his work.
That's the thing I also thought about. Wait a minute, a socialist wrote this? Because it kind of sounds like he's saying that some of the elements of socialism are not great, taken to their logical extreme. Because he's saying the struggle is good. It's almost like he's saying the struggle is good because the struggle would cause this is something we lost, and it's something that's missing in this society. And if you do socialism correctly, supposedly the struggle is not so much there because everyone's given everything equally, and there's going to be some that don't struggle as much, and some others that will.
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the times, socialists and capitalists both look at the same problem, that humanity is, at its root, there's evils, right? That there's issues with the way that society works. That there's people that have, that there's people that don't have. And we go, how do we fix this?
Right.
They're both looking at the same problem. But the difference is the solution that they feel that will work. A socialist goes, humanity is evil, so let's regulate that to an extreme. Let's make sure that we put people in power that are smart, that are intelligent, that can make sure that everything is equal, right? Which sounds, in theory, it sounds great. That you would have somebody that's really controlling and making, and that it would be a group of people and that there would be checks and balances. And, that's what you want to have happen. But the problem is that people are evil and
human nature chooses the easy
humans
button.
Are fallen.
It chooses the easy button every time. There's going to be a group of people. This is not necessarily really talking about this, but
when we've seen that system play out, we've seen that that it's a trick, that it never actually happens, because you have people that don't, become in charge, that don't actually want everything to be equal, but instead they want to have everything. And so you end up, that's why this mentality still exists, because it's like, in theory, this could work well. In theory, it sounds like a very Christian concept, right?
Right.
You see all the time the example of the church in Corinth, right? That where everybody, gave as they had and everything was shared equally and everyone was taken care of. And that's what that concept is based on. And so it sounds like a wonderful, lovely thing. Whereas you've got capitalists that are basically saying, if everybody has the freedom to work, then there's going to be bad people, but the good people are going to have the freedom to counter the bad people, and it will all just kind of work out. There's still going to be bad people that are doing bad things, but you're going to have good people that have the freedom to do good things, and you don't have the bad people that actually become in charge, and then the good people can't do anything. That's basically the mindset behind capitalism, right?
I've heard somebody say this. They said, there is a way for socialism and communism to work, and it's inherent in the word communism, a commune. But you take a small farm or commune with a small to medium group of people, you could probably make it work. The problem is when someone says, nope, we want this to work on a countrywide basis and a higher level government basis. And then it fails almost every single time. And people say, well, it just hasn't been done correctly yet. And it has been done correctly. Why it didn't work.
Choose it freely themselves that it works, which is why Christians were able to do it for a time.
Yes.
But the problem comes with people are, we are selfish and we are prideful, and we're, we tend to end up choosing ourselves. And where socialism goes, we're going to force everybody to do what we want them to do. And capitalism says we're going to leave everybody free to do whatever they want to, whether that's good or bad. Christians end up going, we want to get to the heart of the people and change the sin issue. We want them to discover Christ and make the choice to live, to follow after him, and to choose to live in a loving, unselfish way.
The life solution comes from within and not from without. Right.
So, it's kind of taking both of those things and going, neither one of these is going to end up working in the end. Of course, I'm going to sit here and go, capitalism and the freedom for everyone to choose for themselves definitely ends up better ultimately. But capitalism doesn't work unless the people are good. Just like socialism is not going to work unless the people are good either. Both systems can work if you have people that are Christ followers that are working the system. You know, if
Right.
you have good people, whatever system you have can work. If you have evil people, neither system is going to work. The problem is you're always going to have evil people.
Well, the H.G. Wells doesn't really provide any true solutions. He's really
Right.
asking the questions. He's asking questions. He's doing it in a story, and whether it was his attempt at, I don't think anyone attempts to be extremely influential in a genre. He just was. But I think that over time, people got better and better at being able to articulate asking the questions.
But I appreciate that he was someone that was looking into society and how it functions and was doing that in a way that made people think. I can appreciate that. I don't like where he landed necessarily. I don't necessarily like how he looked at some people versus other people. But I appreciate that he was looking at people, and he made us look at people. You know, I like when people make you think. So, you know, for that I go, yeah, I appreciate H.G. Wells for that. But it is, you know, again, I'm going, this is what the world would look like without God, and what the ending of the world would look like without God. You know, and again I go, well, I can't even, you know, possibly think that that's where humanity would go. Do I think that anybody would think that's where humanity would go? No. Do I know that he kind of took it to an extreme place as a warning and as a, you know, a way to kind of show, let's not, you know, he wanted to say, let's not separate like this. Let's appreciate what we have. Let's appreciate the fact that we have to work, that we have to struggle. You know, that was a very strong plot point that, you know, and thought that I thought that, you know, he's got that right. The fact that our struggle is what defines us and what keeps us sharp. It's what keeps us going.
And even someone who doesn't have a theistic worldview could see that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the very act of survival and propagation of genes it's an act of struggle. You're struggling against those things like hunger, or the fact that we are mortal and we only live for so long. So we are ultimately forced by our own natures to create more copies of ourselves, teach them what to do, how to survive, and that there will be struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And we struggle against each other's worldviews, which is happening right now. So, but the question is, what is the answer to that? The reason for those struggles. I think H.G. Wells is also saying that lack of that, you know, is partially why the world ended up the way it was. So he's trying to say it's a good thing, yet socialism has a lot to say about the struggle.
Yeah. It's funny though, because, and I'm going to bunny trail again, because so many people feel like the fact that there are struggles in the world is a proof that there is no God. That if there actually were a God, then he would be taking care of all of those things. You know, if there was a God that was good, right, and he's all powerful, then why are there sick? Then why is there wars? And why are there people that, you know, are being persecuted and killed all over the place? And, you know, why are there kids that are starving to death? And, you know, there's all of these things that they go, well, that's proof that there is no God.
Right.
And, you know, to me, I'm going, well, according to this, we're actually looking at this is something that makes humanity stronger, that makes us more compassionate, that makes us harder working, that drives us forward. why would a God who cares about us take that away before we're ready? And, as Christians, we go, this struggle is for a brief time, and it's for a purpose. It's for us to learn and for us to grow while we're here, and then we're looking forward to an eternity where there is no more pain, and there's no more sickness, and no more sorrow. Where we've actually learned the things that we're supposed to learn, and ultimately, the learning is to drive us to a relationship with God, right? We're looking at that sickness and that struggle and that sorrow proves to us that we can't do this
right
on our own, that we need Him, and that Him, in our life, that He then sustains and carries us through every struggle. And that life becomes better once we ask Him to take over,
Well, you said struggle, and I thought of, this is from John 16:33.
Mm-hmm.
I have told you these things, Jesus is speaking. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world.
Right.
Now, the world could be this world system, which Jesus does say that the world system, the first shall be last and last shall be first. There will be a flip
Mm-hmm.
of the script, so to speak. So it does not mean that all instantly is all going to be great, but it will be.
But He leaves the world and He allows it to be because, number one, He wants us to have the free will to choose Him, and
otherwise we're just robots.
Right, that requires there to be people who have the free will to not choose Him, and we face the consequences of, a lot of people choosing selfishness and, pride and anger and, all of the things that come from that. But, He's letting that be for a time, and we also know that He's not going to leave it like that forever. That the amount of time that we have there, it's a finite period. That there is a stopping point to that. And for most of us, the stopping point is going to be when we die, but that there is actually a stopping point, an end point for the world. And that then He's going to come and reclaim that and reset things. And, He will rule and reign forevermore. And, that's kind of like, this is the hope of the Christian. That, this is the way it has to be. And He does it for a purpose. That there's a reason for it on multiple levels. Not only is it, the consequences of free will, it's also that this struggle does actually help us, and the end result of that struggle should be us relying on Him. So
but H.G. Wells doesn't really have God in the worldview. We mentioned Jules Verne does mention God quite a bit, even though he does kind of hint that he believes in survival of the fittest and Darwinian, but he is often saying God's providence and often saying things like that. So there's room in Jules Verne's world for God. He does not ask these really, really hard questions, but I think that asking the questions and trying to figure these things out is something that we will be continuing to do as a species for as long as we exist. And I think that some of the best science fiction does that. But by the way, I did look up, and I think we were right about the time machine. It was the first one to actually make it a device or a machine or a bit of technology to do it. Because in the past it was dreams or accidents or sleep or something like that made it happen. And so we were right. And of course, because of that, we have things like the DeLorean from Back to the Future and the TARDIS and all these different, things. Even the Enterprise from Star Trek has traveled in time, at least a couple times. But the thing
on its own?
there's a method. There's things that has done.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. They slingshot it around the sun at a certain warp thing or whatever, and
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha.
The Mystery Science Theater 3000 mantra is in place here. Just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. And honestly, that's for some people that's okay. For some, H.G. Wells does not give an explanation as to how this time travel device works. There are other really interesting aspects of time travel that people have really thought about, but this is really just the first pebble in the lake for that, and the ripples have been felt for many, many, many years. People will actually think up these things, and how could it happen? Even the Avengers Endgame movie that came out, they thought about time travel. So it's something that we are interested in, obsessed with, fascinated by, and we will, as long as we exist and have wonder about the future, or regrets, or nostalgia about the past, it's gonna happen. And so but here's the thing, and we talked about this in another episode where we talked about the 1900s. That the only real true time machine is a book.
Yeah, this is true.
A reading rainbow. No, but you can go
but the
anywhere.
only true place that you can go is into the past.
Or you can
in those books.
But you can theorize about
but it's
the
not
future.
But you said a true time machine.
Yeah, well,
the future's not.
The future's not set. The future is a nebulous thing, and it's up to people, authors and science fiction writers and things like that, to postulate where we could go. And those are possible futures. They're timelines that you can explore.
Now we're getting into low-key.
Well, we are low-key coming to a close of our episode today, and we got really, goodness, just with you alone, we got religious, we got religion, we got philosophy, we've got politics, we've got the science of struggle, and all those different things. So lots of food for thought in this, and I hope that you think about this long after you finish watching us today. If you have some interesting ideas or postulations, philosophies, whatever, just talk about them in the comments. Start some interesting dialogues. We love it.
Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us. I think that we are going to end it there, and hope that you've enjoyed the journey with us. We're going to come back next week, the month of May, with talking about mothers in some form or fashion. So that will be fun. We hope that you'll come back and join us for that. It'll be a little bit of a different curve, but we like doing that from time to time. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.